What is happening?
Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters.
Great news for the American people.
This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri with Branden Rathert, featuring Stephanie Bell, News Director Brian Houseworth, John Marsh, and Hannah, the producer.
This is why we listen to you.
Get ready, pal.
And now, here's your...
I'm sure Branden is feeling good because while he is sleeping in, I am taking over the show. This is Stephanie Bell, and I am joined by guest co-host Mark Ellinger.
Good morning.
And we've also got producer Hannah with us.
What up,
and
yo?
John Marsh.
Yo.
And I'm not going to hide the ball. I am feeling really good this Friday morning because before I was really confused about AI. It kind of freaks me out. People say AI and I don't really know what they're meaning. And, Kamala just made me feel better about AI.
And I think the first part of this issue that should be articulated is AI is kind of a fancy thing. First of all, it's 2 letters. It means artificial intelligence.
Completely cleared up for me.
Solved all our confusion.
Well, when you put it that way.
I'm totally at ease now about AI. The other thing I'm at ease about is who had the cocaine in the White House. We figured that out yesterday, didn't we?
Oh, did we?
No, nobody had cocaine. I don't know. They can't figure it out. With all the cameras in the White House, nobody can figure it out.
It magically had 0 fingerprints on it. Isn't that cool?
Case closed.
And no DNA either.
No DNA. And then they said, is it in a cubby? Right? I think they said it was found in a cubby. And, there's a lot of visitors through the White House, so there's just no way to tell. Yeah, I mean, I actually have not been in the White House. I have not taken the tour, but not that many people go through the White House, do they?
It was over the weekend, and over the weekend only tours are by invitation, and it's a fairly small number of people. I think they said it maybe 200 people total.
You mean you guys have not had an invitation to the White House?
I mean, I think I have, but I think I didn't go, but I've not been on the official tour.
What?
Well, when I was a kid.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Did you bring your cocaine with you?
No, I left it in the car.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. So I got on their website because I have been to a lot of other events where, they give you actually usually get an email beforehand and you have to, give them a copy of your driver's license, and there's all sorts of things when Secret Service and security is involved, and they check you out before you go, and then usually you get an email that says, don't bring this, don't bring this, don't bring this, and it's actually on the White House website. It lists cocaine's not on the prohibited list items, actually.
I bet it is now.
But bags of any kind are, and wasn't it in a baggie? So they could have brought just the white powder, just needed to be in a different vessel.
Maybe they did what that local guy did this week and they keistered it.
Yeah, let's hope not. Let's hope not. But there's you can't have fireworks, flags. I didn't know you can't have flags. Lighters, liquids, mace, signs, strollers, tablets, tripods. So I'm just thinking, we take people over to the courthouse, Mark, and, I have clients who have weapons, knives, whatever. And when you're going to the courthouse, it's a good reminder, hey, guys, you can't have anything. And so I'm just thinking, it's your big day. You're finally going to the White House. You get these emails, I can't have my stroller. I can't have a flag. I can't have flash photography. But you think it's a good idea to take your cocaine with you? I mean, the fact that they're pinning this on some random tourist through the White House is just ridiculous.
Well, the fact that maybe they had their cocaine with them in the first place maybe shows an intelligence level that might indicate they might not be thinking about not not taking the cocaine with.
You mean there might be people in the White House who aren't that intelligent, Mark?
Or who are just flat out lying to us, I think is the other thing.
No.
Or they're just high and they don't know the difference.
That could be true. That could be true. Well, the other thing that we learned yesterday, and we didn't learn a whole lot, and I posed this question on Twitter, and I got some good responses. But who did we try harder to find, the Supreme Court leaker or the White House cokehead? Because it seems like when we were looking for the leaker, they just asked around and everyone just said, "Not it," and they said, "Okay, no one." We don't know who it is.
There's a very detailed investigation. Did you do it? No. Okay.
But at least, they took like a year to do it. Here, they're like 11 days. Can you even do a full investigation? Clearly
Can
they
you
didn't.
even get like DNA testing back that fast?
Well, they said there wasn't DNA on it, so I guess that solves that problem. But,
wouldn't you have to test it, though, to know that? I don't know.
It came back blue, and they said, yep, it's Coke. Okay.
But it was serious enough that they made everyone evacuate. But what we did find out yesterday, so we didn't find out a whole lot, but we did find out apparently they found drugs in the White House before. And does that make it better or worse? It was weed. Are we concerned? If it was weed and we found out that, would we be like, oh, well?
Yeah, but do you remember when the Biden administration came in, one of the big controversies was they were kicking people out and not giving them security clearances if they had drugs in their background,
That's right.
which they had promised about decriminalizing drugs and all that. So, they speak with their own set of hypocrisy.
That's right. And to Stephanie's question, and Mark will remember this very well. You're a historian, you know it. There was actually a Supreme Court nominee right after Bork. Bork got defeated, which Biden was involved in that effort. Between Bork and Kennedy, the middle guy, Ginsburg. The reason Ginsburg didn't get it, there was an outcry because he had admitted smoking marijuana. Reagan had to withdraw him for that time. So it was really a different era.
That was the war on drugs. We've now surrendered, so we can just move on.
Yeah.
Well, we will probably not hear more about cocaine, but the question I think really is, are we going to hear? Because we never knew about the first two instances of the marijuana that occurred sometime over the last, year. And so, when they find drugs in the White House, are they even going to tell us? I don't know. It seems ridiculous.
I thought one of the funniest things about this was, it was found in a locker, is what the Fox News story said. And the key to that locker is still missing.
Wow.
So whoever put it there is like, I'm not going back for that locker.
It is definitely chucked in some large body of water, I'm sure. All right, Brian, big news in mid-Missouri yesterday with the Columbia budget. Give us just the top line. What should we really be looking at when it comes down to the proposed budget?
Diversity.
Well, no, not so much that. I think the biggest thing is it's an increase, $506 million to $533 million is the amount. But really, two very quick highlights, Stephanie. Number one, city employees will get a pay raise. We're not sure for each of them how much, but it's about $10 million it is proposed. The council would have to approve that. I've already talked to two council members, and they do support it. And public safety is a big priority for the city manager. He's worried about city recruiting and retaining officers. He wants to boost officer starting pay from $51 to $57. I believe it's $57,200. And the new fire station being built on Scott Boulevard will open in September. So public safety really a cornerstone, city employee pay as well.
Yeah, and I know that public safety number would be big news for all of mid-Missouri. I know probably not good welcome news for the city of Ashland just because so many of the local communities compete.
Yes.
And I know I've heard that being on the Ashland Council before is we just can't compete with some of those larger salaries. So I know a lot of eyes will be on that budget as it moves through the process. A couple quick notes about today's show. We have an exciting show scheduled. Bill Eigel is going to join us at 6:35. He is fired up. I've heard he is excited about his fundraising numbers in the gubernatorial race. Of course, we haven't heard from him since Crystal Quaid, the Democrat, entered the race. So I want to get his take on that. Also, there were a lot of line item vetoes in his district. Want to see what he has to say. I heard on Twitter yesterday he was also saying that the governor should call a special session. So we will hear from him at 6:35. We will also hear from Senator Mike Bernstetter at 7:10, get his take on the veto and special session. I imagine it will be different from Senator Eigel's take. And then at 8:10, Mark, tell us about our guest at 8:10.
So we'll have Hans von Spakovsky, who's from the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C., talking about the ACE Act, which is the American Credibility and Elections Act that's being pushed by Republicans in Congress to to make sure Zuckerbucks are gone and other types of features like that. He's going to come on and talk a little bit about that. He testified in front of Congress, and that bill is actually actively in markup right now.
All right. And also a little different today, Mark is co-hosting for the first time. You have heard him before as a guest on some legal issues. But Mark, give us a quick, for those, so a lot of folks may be listening right now on 104.5 News Radio 950 KWOS. They might be familiar with you, but some other folks might not. So give us a little bit of your background as you join us officially for your first day as a co-host.
Yeah, glad to be here. So grew up in Jeff City, grew up in politics, literally. Worked for the state auditor when it was a Republican, Margaret Kelly, years ago. Went into private practice, was county commissioner of Cole County, presiding commissioner for 8 years. Stephanie and I are law partners. I think everybody knows that. And I'm currently the president of the Republican National Lawyers Association. Served on the redistricting commissions for the Senate the last 2 cycles. So, and I think between Stephanie and I, we represent just about everybody in Republican politics at one time or another in some way, shape, or form. So, going from a political background and then do a lot of other type of governmental litigation work over all these years, and been very involved in communities just like I think everybody else in the show is. So glad to be here and looking forward to the day.
You know, Mark, it's probably a good thing that Branden isn't here, because he would spend the entire show quizzing you about what it's like to work with Stephanie Bell every single day. You know, we get to hang out with her a couple hours a day, but beyond that, I know Branden would have lots of questions.
I think the very first time I ever called in on the show, that was the first question he asked me, is tell us something about Stephanie that nobody knows.
Well, and I think one of the questions I got when I first started on the show was like, well, you seem to get along with Branden so well. And I said, like, Mark and Branden are kind of in the same age bracket. And I said, and Mark and I
so
worked together.
You're calling me old already?
And
I didn't get on the show.
You
Thanks.
know, I'm like, you want me to hang out with like a 50-year-old white guy all day? And I've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, so you had experience. That's why we hired you, Stephanie.
Right. So, no, it's a pleasure to work with you, Mark. Tell me one thing, what initially got you into politics, or what's one of your earliest political memories?
Well, I'll give you the earliest political memory, which gives me as a little kid, and I'll date myself badly here, but in 1971, Kit Bond announced that he was running for governor. They had a picnic at Memorial Park in Jeff City. It rained. As like any good 4-year-old kid, I ran around in the mud until I was entirely covered in mud. And when they started the picnic, Kit Bond grabbed one of those "Hi, my name is" stickers, wrote something on it real quick, and said, "Before we start, I want to make some introductions." He introduced, the dignitaries. Then he called me up on stage and with the sticker set, and I want to give him the award for dirtiest boy at the picnic. So at 4 years old in 1971, I was in politics.
All right.
Never come out of it since then.
And your dad concurred.
Yes, he did. And I don't think he was very happy about it, which is probably, if it wasn't for Kit, I probably would have been in a lot bigger trouble that day.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are going to have a fun show today. We've got Bill Iger. no possibility of Putin winning, although he's telling everyone we have no ammunition, right?
Out of bullets.
Yeah.
Not a big deal.
All right. Still, Putin has no possibility of winning. At the same time, Congress is in. I think the Senate is in today. And yesterday, the House punted on the NDAA. Mark, what's the NDAA?
So the NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act. It's effectively the policy act that controls defense policy for a year. And there's all sorts of amendments that the conservative caucus has been putting forward there. Anti-abortion language to provide that the Defense Department can't fund money on abortion, banning transgender special provisions that were in there, even has some Ukraine funding restrictions on it.
So my understanding with the NDAA is typically it's pretty bipartisan. Everyone just votes it. It's no big deal, and it's one thing that everyone kind of agrees on, and we never hear about it. And it's an annual re-up, and so it's really weird that we punted here. But I guess the Democrats have said they're all against it, and so we need, as Republicans, we would need every vote, but we've got some holdouts.
Yeah, I think, look, it is always historically been voted overwhelmingly. Defense is one of the few areas we tend to get agreement and compromise on. The Democrats have said that maybe there's a few holdouts that might actually flip over. They don't know because it's of some of the provisions that are on there. But if all the Republicans don't vote for it, it's very hard to get this passed. It comes to the floor potentially today for a vote. And there's, I think, 80 amendments were approved to be voted on the floor. So every amendment gets the potential of an up-down vote. Remember, that was McCarthy's thing, was he was going to allow amendments to be voted on the floor.
Sure.
He's going to regret that after today, I'm pretty sure.
All right. I'm sure we will all be tuned in to C-SPAN. This week, we saw Lena Khan, the chair of the FTC, on in a congressional hearing for more than 3 hours. I think it was before the House Judiciary Committee, getting some heat over her treatment of Elon Musk. And we know she's been criticized before for being an activist. And I think someone even said the most activist person in the Biden administration. Now the FTC is opening an investigation into OpenAI. Any thoughts on that?
Well, let's see. They're 0 for 4 in their last 4 cases. So the only thought I have is if I was Chat GPT or OpenAI, I'd be a pretty good spot now. But the FTC seems to lose every time they challenge something.
They do. So they will be looking into AI after, Kamala's been looking into it as well. So,
well, maybe Kamala could just ask Chat GPT for a good answer about what they should investigate.
Her answer did kind of sound like it came from Chat GPT. In the meantime, all the 2024 hopefuls will be in Iowa this weekend today for the Family Leadership Summit, except for Donald Trump. And he is bowing out of a lot of these initial events. Thoughts on that?
That's an interesting thing because there's a guy named, I think it's Bob Vanderplatz, that runs the Family Leadership Summit up in Iowa. He's very powerful in the community up there. His endorsement has been the winner of the Iowa caucus, the last 3 Iowa caucuses.
Really?
And he came out yesterday, I think, after Trump said he would not attend, and said, I'm looking for an alternative to Trump this time around.
Wow.
Which could potentially be a big deal. He's even visited DeSantis in Florida, in Tallahassee, and spent, I think, the night with Casey and Ron.
Interesting. Well, I am going to get your thoughts on DeSantis. I know you're a big DeSantis guy, so I'm going Host Mark Ellinger.
Good morning.
And producer Hannah.
Hello.
And John Marsh. And our friend Brian Houseworth is running around here watching this weather. Apparently, there is a chance of storms, but it looks like a cooler weekend. It seems like, let's see, tomorrow high of 91.
I'll take anything over 100.
Why is it 91 is considered cooler?
Well, if you
I hate this time of year.
If you walked in a parade on 4th of July, I think it was 91 at 9 a.m. at the Ashland Parade. So I'm feeling pretty good on this Feel Good Friday about 91 tomorrow. We've had a heavy week with lots of big announcements, lots of Missouri-based political news. And we've been talking to we talked to, Senator Huff, we talked to Senator Rader, and now we are going to welcome into the show State Senator Bill Eigel. We have not had a chance to talk with him since Crystal Quaid has announced that she's running for governor on the Democrat side. And I'm interested to get his take because her ad took aim at several of the candidates that are already declared in the Missouri governor's race, and it seemed to leave him out. Were you offended, Bill Eigel, that she didn't take direct aim at you in the ad?
Well, first of all, good morning, Stephanie. And no, I'm not too worried about that. In fact, I'm really not too worried about Crystal Quaid at all. I think she took a couple shots at Mike Kehoe, which I think is that makes sense because she's probably going to be facing him in the Democratic primary. But I think that if you think about the message that she has when she's running for governor, the state of Missouri has been rejecting Democratic Party principles for a couple generations now, or at least a couple decades now. Their message of everything from defunding the police to allowing chaos to take place in our urban environments to the mutilation of children around the state in the name of this transgender ideology. Missourians have really said no to that, and they've said no to that overwhelmingly. So I think if we're going to see the policies that we need to have in this state that are going to put us ahead and put us on par with the Floridas and the Texases and the Tennessees of this country, then it's going to have to come from the Republican Party. The Missourians have continually chosen the GOP platform as the method that they want to use in order to make our state successful. So, she came out with a fancy ad, and that's great. But, I think the real decision that we're going to have to look for is going to happen in August in the Republican primary.
Senator, we appreciate you joining us, and it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. I want to ask you about the veto session coming up in September. The governor did have a number of line item vetoes, more than what I normally see, and they weren't all in Democratic districts, and quite a few of them were actually in red districts. I know Lewis Riggs up in Hannibal was furious about a road project, and I heard some complaints from one of your colleagues, Senator Schroer, in St. Charles, specifically about that contaminated water area there. Will there be an effort to override the governor, A, and B, will there be enough votes to override some of these vetoes from your perspective?
Well, that's yet to be determined. I hate to give you kind of a non-answer on that, but, we've never overridden Governor Parson before. And I tell you, the real story about this budget, and when we talk about these vetoes, is the budget itself. This was a $50 billion plus budget, the largest budget we've ever had. And we are now spending more money in that budget recommended by Governor Parson than more than twice the amount of money that we were spending back in 2010. And it tells me that we have really gotten away from the commitments as Republicans that we are making in campaign season to make government smaller, to make government more efficient. We've actually doubled the size of government. And in Governor Parson, Governor Parson and Governor Greitens, in their 7 years while I've served in the state Senate, have grown the expenditures of this state more in those 7 years than every Democratic governor combined going back to the founding of the state. So we have an enormous spending problem in the state of Missouri. Now, what really frustrates me about these vetoes is the fact that in spite of all that spending, we had $10 billion in new decision items. So $10 billion in earmarks. I like to refer to this budget as making earmarks great again. And I heard your interview with Lincoln Huff. And Lincoln Huff failed to mention all the boondoggle projects that he and Governor Parson put into this budget, whether it was for a dinosaur museum for kids in Jefferson County, whether it was tens of millions of dollars for private stadium expenditures out in Kansas City. There has never been a more wasteful budget than the one we saw this year. So what really frustrates me, though, is that in spite of all that wasteful spending, Governor Parson couldn't find time to set aside a few $1 million for things that were actual priorities for the people, whether it was $5 million for some clean drinking water in St. Charles County or a police academy in St. Charles County or some real priorities that were very low cost that he could have made a reality. So my disappointment for Governor Parson and the out of control spending that he has this state on a trajectory of, I think is a real problem, not just for the future finances of the state, but for the future brand of a Republican Party that is saying something entirely different in campaign season.
Well, I want to follow up on that, and I think for our listeners, this is significant. You are blasting your own Republican governor. You are. You've basically said he and Greitens grew government more than any Democrat. Did I hear that right?
Well, I'm not just saying that. That's exactly what he did. In fact, when you go back to the State of the State address back in January of this year, when Mike Parson got up on the dais and spoke to the legislature, he did nothing except for tell us what he wanted to spend new government program money on. In fact, I was sitting 2 seats down from the minority floor leader of the Senate, J.J. Rizzo, who never sat down from clapping because he was so excited about all the new government that Mike Parson was going to create this year alone. And I asked J.J. Rizzo afterwards if he liked the speech that Mike Parson gave, and he told me that he couldn't have expected a better speech from Jay Nixon himself. And this is why when I travel around the state of Missouri and I'm talking to folks about 2024 and the decision we have to make, Republicans around the state, outside the bubble of Jefferson City, are absolutely furious. They look at all the things that we didn't get done down in Jefferson City this session, which could have been initiative petition reform. It could have been cutting their personal property taxes. It could have been protecting Missouri farmland from being bought by foreign owners. And they say, why is it that big states like Florida and Texas, who elect less Republicans to their respective state capitals, are able to get these big red victories? And the answer is because we have, unfortunately, and this hurts me to say it because I supported Mike Parson in his reelection, we have a center-left coalition in Jefferson City that is growing government almost every single day. And I think there's a real reckoning coming for the swamp and status quo of Jefferson City in 2024 because I think we're going to make a different decision about who we want to lead this state moving forward.
All right. We are talking with State Senator Bill Eigel.
Senator, we've had Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft on with us repeatedly, and the discussion frequently turns back to election security and all. I know you've been out on the road. You've heard from constituents and people out there. Are people still very concerned about that coming back into especially another presidential election?
Yes, absolutely. I would consider the election integrity a top 3 issue. And I tell you what, the secretary is going around trying to claim credit for the things that the legislature actually did to make our elections a little more secure. So when we talk about getting voter ID, when we talk about getting rid of the ballot harvesting machines, when we talk about getting rid of the Zuckerbucks, all of those things were part of House Bill 1878 that we passed a couple years ago that I voted for. The secretary didn't have anything to do with those. I'll tell you what the secretary did have a lot to do with, and that's the mess that we have on our initiative petition process. Under Section 116.120, the Secretary of State is empowered to reject from the ballot any item that doesn't meet constitutional muster that's come through the initiative process. So, for example, if something like Amendment 3 has multiple subjects, and you know that Amendment 3 had about 14 different subjects on it when it reached the ballot last November, the Secretary of State is empowered to reject those from the ballot. But what did Jay Ashcroft do? He did nothing. What about Clean Missouri? What about Medicaid expansion? Also should have been rejected from the ballot. Jay Ashcroft did nothing. So if we're going to talk about election integrity, I'm happy to do it. Folks are not happy with where we're at. And this whole conversation about initiative petition is an issue today because Jay Ashcroft hasn't been doing his job. So I think it will continue to be. And by the way, I'm the only candidate for governor right now that's talking about getting rid of the voting machines that very few folks actually trust to count the ballots on election day. I think that's going to be a big issue next year as well.
Senator, we're looking at an economy that's struggling here. Businesses are struggling. We see a lot of that across the country and certainly in lots of parts of Missouri. A lot of businesses in the Capitol talk about the necessity of getting some tort reform and getting some litigation relief. Talk a little bit about, I know you've been taking some money from trial lawyers into the PAC. your kind of views on tort reform and how we let kind of unshackle business from the litigation business.
Well, so first of all, I'm a defender of rights. I defend all our rights, and that includes the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and it also includes our Seventh Amendment. And our Seventh Amendment ensures that if you've been wronged by another person or you've been wronged by another business out there, particularly some of these big, powerful corporate special interests, that you should have your day in court. And unfortunately, there is a very big, powerful special interest in Jefferson City that wants to roll back the Seventh Amendment and prevent you from having your day in court if you've been harmed by a large corporation. And honestly, the things that we need to do to get this state growing and moving forward include a reform of our tax code, include a reform of our spending policies in Jefferson City. In fact, if we could have taken that $10 billion instead of just wasting it on earmarks like Mike Parson wanted us to do, and instead rolled that into massive property taxes, rolled that into massive personal property taxes, cut down dramatically the income tax in the state, it would have done far more to get this state growing again, like the Floridas and the Tennessees and the Texases, and unlike the stagnation that we've experienced because of the status quo, which is in charge in Jefferson City. So, most of the conservative folks in the Senate and the House today are going to continue to be a defender of those rights and help us chart an economic path that doesn't continue on this path where nobody's moving to Missouri right now. And we even though nobody's moving to Missouri right now, we have senior leadership in the state of Missouri, including Mike Parson, Mike Kehoe, who are focusing on what the special interest is telling them is important. And this idea that if we carve away our rights, including the Seventh Amendment, that somehow that's going to make Missouri more attractive or a place for businesses to come to is just that just doesn't make sense to me. So I'm going to continue to be a defender of rights down in Jefferson City, and I know that it will aggravate those powerful special interests, but honestly, that's kind of my specialty.
All right, we have about 60 seconds. I know we're ending a fundraising quarter, and I've heard that you are enthused by your fundraising numbers, but I've also seen the latest Missouri Scout poll that has Jay Ashcroft at 34%, Mike Kehoe at 14%, and you at just 4%. What's your plan for your path forward here?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, let's talk a little about fundraising. Today, we're going to report that we raised over $800,000 amongst 40,000 individual donations and over 20,000 individual donors. That's going to be more individual donors than both of my opponents combined times 100. And that tells you that, unlike Mike Kehoe, I'm not just going to get a bunch of special interest money at $25,000 and $50,000 apiece. I have actual everyday Missourians and Americans outside the borders of the state of Missouri that are donating $10 to $15 because they believe in a guy that's going to bring both a reckoning for the swamp special interest in Jefferson City and the solutions that we need in a state like Missouri that's a big red state to get this state growing and put ourselves on a path of leadership for these United States. What's the path forward? Well, we're going to keep pushing that message out there. I see there is a big temptation to get caught up in the polling 12 months out. Well, I tell you what, in 2016, Pete Kinder was leading Eric Greitens by more than 30 points, and we know how that one turned out. I have a strong belief that the message that we can have a better version of Missouri if we get back to the founding principles of the GOP platform is going to be so overwhelmingly popular because the people of this state are desperate for that warrior leader that's going to challenge the stagnation and the coalitions that have entrenched themselves in Jefferson City and are going to get this state growing again. So check back with me as we get closer to the primary. I think you're going to see a big change.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Secretary of State, Ashcroft will have a chance to respond to some of those claims by For Branden Rathert on Wake Up Mid-Missouri, I am joined by co-host Mark Ellinger this morning, and you didn't include in your bio that you have significant redistricting experience. You have, when we talk about redistricting, a lot of people think about congressional redistricting. It tends to get the most headlines. Of course, it's been tied up in the courts, and there's been a lot on the national stage as far as redistricting. But when we think about, and Branden likes to say, the more localer, the more importanter, and when we really talk about what would impact us, it's really your state House and your state Senate districts. And you have served on the last two Senate commissions?
Yeah, on the last two Senate reapportionment commissions, I was vice chair in 2012. Yeah, 2012, and I was chairman in 2021.
All right, so when Stephen Weber gets elected in the next cycle, we can blame you because I
no,
mean,
you can't blame me because we couldn't get a deal. You could blame the courts for that one. You can blame me for keeping Kurt Schaefer and Caleb Rowden as the senators for Columbia all these years.
Okay, all right. Well, but it does matter, and in that race in particular, it's been pointed out that it would be very, very difficult for a Republican to win because even with all of the support Senator Rowden has had, and he's in leadership and all of that, he wouldn't have won his last race without that little sliver of Cooper County that he had that no longer exists within that district. And so it looks like it might be, a shoo-in for Stephen Weber at this point. And I don't even think we have a declared candidate in that race yet. And so point is, it matters, and it likely will change the outcome for the Boone County senator. We do have there, but there was a case heard in Cole County before Judge Beadham this week that not a lot of people are paying attention to, watching. I haven't seen much on it at all. Why? Why is no one paying attention to this case?
Well, I mean, first of all, we just had a set of elections on the new Senate map, so I think people just kind of overlooked the fact that there's a change potentially coming from a court. The funny thing about that case is, we couldn't get an agreement with 5 Republicans and 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats. We couldn't get an agreement. They sent it to the courts. The courts drew an unconstitutional map. You would think the courts could at least get something right. They drew an unconstitutional map. Ironically, that's the exact same thing that happened 10 years ago, which is how we ended up drawing the new map that saved the district here in Boone County. This case, they changed the law. Clean Missouri and Cleaner Missouri changed the law so that the judge writes a map. There's a district up in Buchanan County that's unconstitutional. It's going to get changed. The Democrats have sued over that, and then the districts in St. Louis County, which are really a mess and not splitting cities. Ultimately, a judge is going to rewrite the map. We're going to have a different map. It's probably not going to affect Mid-Missouri, but it could potentially affect the balance in the Senate.
Interesting. Well, we will continue to watch that case. fearless leader, Stephanie Bell here.
Hopefully he's getting that checked out.
Right. Stephanie Bell here in for Branden Rathert. Of course, you just heard producer Hannah.
Hello.
John Marsh is here.
Good morning.
And Mark Ellinger is sitting in as a co-host.
Good morning, y'all.
All right. Well, we just had a fiery interview from Senator Bill Eigel. Y'all are texting us at 573-874-9390, and you are very divided. Jim has this question. I think this is directed for our next guest, Senator Bernskoetter. He says, Eigel is either absolutely correct or the guy that you don't want on your rowing team because he will not get in sync. Senator Bernskoetter, would you want Eigel on your rowing team? What's your take on that question?
Good morning. I think we missed part of that. John was pushing buttons here, but I heard something about Senator Eigel, and then I kind of lost it. But
Sure you did. Well, we've been talking all week. It's been a Senate-heavy week. We've been talking all week with a lot of your colleagues about what's to come in the upcoming veto and special session. The budget has been, top of the headlines over the last month. Obviously, a really big budget. People have, Senator Eigel, for one, has a problem with just the sheer size of the budget. Other folks have a problem with the line item vetoes. What should we know about the budget as far as what's in there for mid-mo? Did anything in your district get line itemed? What do you expect for the upcoming veto session?
yeah, I mean, there was a lot. I don't know about a lot, but there was quite a few things in the budget for the Central Missouri area. First of all, obviously, the state employee pay raise. That was a great thing for the surrounding area. We got there's some money in there for the Special Learning Center. We got more money for Lincoln than we've ever had before. Amtrak, there was some money in the budget for Amtrak. There's also money for labs in Jeff City, and then also there's $300 million in there to fix up the inside of the state capitol. Everybody knows we've been fixing up the outside of the state capitol and working on the windows and the heating and cooling and sealing up the outside. But there's also money in the budget to fix up the inside of the state capitol.
Senator, thanks for joining us, especially in studio. I want to go back to that. That's very interesting. I knew about the work because I've seen it, the outside and the windows, and for a couple of years it was kind of basically tarps put over the outside. Now that's off. $300 million, I believe you said, for the inside. And any sense of what they plan to do? Because what would they be doing with that money?
So they're trying to go back to as much of original as possible. So actually the estimate was $500 million. I think it's higher than that now. There was $300 million put in the budget last year for the fixing up the Capitol. There's another $300 million that was put in the budget this year to fix up the state capitol. So that actually hasn't been transferred yet, but it's to do away with some of the offices that are double levels, and also to add more hearing rooms. The grand plan is to put like a basement underneath the front lawn, and it would have skylights and there'd be more hearing rooms and more office space, and just do away with some of the multi-level offices where there's 10 people in an office.
Okay, very interesting.
Senator, I'm curious. You talked about the changes to the Capitol there. One of the things there's been a lot of discussion about is, in years past, taking over the MoDOT building and moving MoDOT out. MoDOT's now got an enormous amount of money. The budget's put, I think, I saw Governor Parson said that the STIP is going to be $10 billion for the next 5 or 6 years. Talk a little bit about how MoDOT is going to be doing some real big projects both in mid-Missouri and around the state, and also the concept of maybe taking over that building that's right attached to the Capitol and using that as office space.
So that's another part of the plan, is to move MoDOT out of that building there next to the Capitol. They really haven't decided how we're going to do that. Over the years we've said you could put some freshman state legislators or staff over there in that MoDOT building. Nobody, wants to be over in that building. Everybody wants to be in the Capitol. So it's always kind of been a tug of war trying to get people to go over to that building. But in reality, I mean, it's going to take years. So if we said, we put the freshman state reps over there, for example, anybody that's serving now would probably not have to leave the Capitol, and so the people coming in wouldn't know any different. But it's always been a tug of war trying to figure out who's actually going to go over there. But yeah, that was part of the plan too, is to take over that MoDOT building. And then, like you said, there's, almost $3 billion going to be spent on I-70. So there's a lot of money in the Highway Department's budget.
All right, we are talking to State Senator Mike Bernskoetter about special session. So we talked a little bit about redistricting and maybe the change of the balance of the Senate. The Senate's fairly small. You've got 34 members, and I think in the last year people have described it, you've really got three parties. You've got the Conservative caucus, you've got the rest of the Conservatives, and then you've got the Democrats. Now, depending on what happens with this Cole County litigation, maybe there's a pickup over there. We think perhaps there'll be a pickup for Democrats in Boone County. Talk to me about how that might change the makeup of the Senate going forward, and what the impact of that would be.
Well, Stephanie, I thought they did away with the Conservative caucus.
Good point.
You remember that?
I do remember that. You think it's coming back next year? Or you think it ever left?
No, there's a lot of people running for office, so anything can happen next year. There's several of the senators that have announced that they're running for office, so it'll be an interesting year. But even if we do lose the Boone County seat, which, like you said, is probably a foregone conclusion, it'll still be 23-11. I don't see that changing.
Mike, talk to us about the question we asked Senator Eigel about election integrity. We've been assured by Secretary of State Ashcroft that that's not an issue at all. There are a lot of people out there, I'm sure you've talked to constituents across mid-Missouri, who are still very concerned about that, especially on a national level. Many of them, not many, some of we've heard of, just thrown their hands up about the whole election process.
Yeah, that is a big concern. I know when I was running for Senate last time, my opponent made election integrity a big concern, and he said there's all kinds of problems going on, and I know here in Cole County, Steve Korsmeyer isn't having any problems. I talked to the county clerk in Camden County; they weren't having any problems, but everybody's concerned about that, what's going on. Mostly, like you said, mostly nationally, everybody's concerned about making sure that the elections are fair.
It's no shock that a lot of things got left on the table at the end of last session. So as you prepare for the next session, what any of your priorities get left on the table last year, or what are you looking forward to most in pushing for the next session?
So actually, the only not budget bill, but the only bill that the governor actually vetoed was the Senate Bill 189, and I actually had a piece in there. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the Elizabeth Olten situation out around St. Martin's from several years ago, and there's a piece got slipped in there about second-degree murder a couple years ago, and I've been trying to change that, and actually, all my colleagues agreed that it needs to be changed back, but then there was other provisions in the bill that the governor vetoed it for. So that would be a big priority for me again next year is getting that second-degree murder put back into law.
Hey, Mike, this is Mark here. It seems that sports betting has just sucked the air out of a lot of things in the legislature. It killed effectively almost the last week of session in the Senate this year. Talk a little bit about the opportunities for sports betting. There are a lot of folks that are interested in it. The Cardinals and Royals and Chiefs have spent a lot of time in the Capitol talking about it. Is that something you think will come back next year, or are we foregone for that for a while until bodies change in the Senate?
Well, I'm sure it'll come back next year. I'm sure we'll talk about it next year, but as long as Senator Hoskins is around, and he's not going to. He's more worried about putting slot machines in gas stations than he is, worried about sports betting. He always talks about how his constituents want to, do sports betting. They want to be able to do sports betting. Well, we had the opportunity to do sports betting last year, and he won't let it go unless it has the video lottery terminal language in it as well. The first time we've ever had a vote on video lottery terminals, and it was lost like 23-11 or something. So that's not an issue that people are interested in, but they are interested in sports betting. But as long as he's around, we won't be able to separate those two issues.
So some optimism for next session and some pessimism, a mixed bag.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else you'd like to add before we let you go?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, everybody's talking about the things the governor vetoed, and I prefer to be more positive about, he probably vetoed maybe 1% of our budget, the 99% of the budget that he agreed with us on. And I think there's a lot of good things in there. I mentioned several of them. There's a $300 million on a psychiatric hospital in Kansas City that's been needed for a long time. So there's a lot of good things in the budget, and we need to stop focusing on all the negative things or the negative of the vetoes. So
all right,
that's about all I wanted to say.
Some things to feel good about in the budget on our Feel Good Friday.
Right.
Thanks for joining us. We will hope to talk to you again real soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, coming up next, it is What's Hot with Hannah. What's hot today, Hannah?
I found a super weird wedding trend, and I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I'm getting married.
We had no idea.
So just some weird wedding trends I've been seeing lately. I have feelings about it.
Wedding trends up next. name today, so it's
Don't look at me.
definitely my fault. We're sorry to Millie, our friend, who actually we think she actually likes when we miss What's Hot with Hannah. But today I'm really interested to know the latest trends because we were talking about I have a beef with DeSantis. Because I recently heard that he got married at Disney World, and I'm not sure that I can get over that.
Disney adults are a different breed. I don't know.
I'm really struggling with that this week. But Hannah, so yeah, what's hot? What's the latest wedding trends?
I saw a story this morning, and I've been seeing lots of trends regarding the wedding party in general this year as I've been wedding planning. This is probably the weirdest one I've seen. There's a farm in Arcade, New York, and they rent out their llamas for events. So you can, rent a llama for your birthday party or whatever. They had someone rent a llama to be a groomsman in their wedding.
Oh my God.
And they put the llama in a tuxedo with a bow tie and everything.
And he promptly spit on the wedding guests, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and the way that they did it, they somehow put the suit on just the front of the llama. So if you're looking at the llama, head on, it looks like a human body with a llama head. It's so bizarre.
You're not planning on involving animals in your wedding?
No, I'm not. I am going to have
Rathert.
There will be 3 toddlers, though, so that could be interesting.
There's weddings, they're just so unpredictable, which is part of why I think everyone loves them. There's the new trend where you have a male, an adult male flower girl.
Yes,
and
the flower dude.
Yeah, I really like this. I went to a wedding recently and it was so cute because there were flower girls and the first one started dropping the petals and the second one was so concerned she started picking them all back up. But it was the cutest moment. Mark, you've been to some weddings this summer. Any fun wedding news?
Yeah, no, weddings are exciting, particularly when you have fires at weddings. You do not want to have a fire at a wedding.
No.
Yeah, Hannah said she was having nightmares about bad wedding mishaps. What was the last wedding mishap that we read about?
Yesterday there was a bridal shop, not locally, it was out of state.
Yeah.
And they defaulted on their lease. And so they just closed up shop, and there were brides who had put deposits down for their dresses and brides who had ordered their dresses and they weren't in yet, and they were just kind of, SOL.
I would not have the stomach for people who do the travel wedding where you have to get all of your stuff to a foreign country. And I've seen, missing luggage. So you're missing your dress, or you're missing these very important things. Planning a wedding is so intense. I can't imagine trying to do it and move all your stuff to somewhere else.
That's the value of carry-on luggage right there.
Well,
Similar to the flower dude, I've also seen flower dudes hand out loaves of bread. So it's FLOUR, flower. And then I've also seen weddings where they wanted a child-free wedding. And so they had the grandmas be the flower girls. And I think that's really cute.
I like that too. All right. Your latest wedding trends with Wake Up Midnight. Mid-Missouri on a Feel Good Friday. We are feeling good about a lot of things. We just heard from State Senator Mike Bernskoetter that there's a lot in the governor's budget to be feeling good about, even though not everyone has that same feeling. I am joined by co-host Mark Ellinger, guest co-host this morning.
Good morning, y'all.
All right, and producer Hannah.
Howdy ho.
And John Marsh.
Right here.
All right. Hey, John, tell us. So there was a really bad plane crash yesterday in the Ozarks. What do we know so far about this
Yeah,
thing?
this was a deal at the Lake of the Ozarks. It was yesterday afternoon. The plane was taking off from the Grand Glaze Airport, and there was a witness who told Osage Beach Police he saw the plane roll and spiral toward the ground right after takeoff and crashed. And it turned out 2 men were killed, 2 young men. Hayden Richard, who was 22 of Carrollton, was a pilot. Evan Vandiver, who was 19 of Richmond, died. And another man, Gary Vandiver, suffered serious injuries. He was taken to University Hospital. That plane was a single-engine Piper built in 1969.
But somebody lived. I mean, I saw the photos. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, he was reported in serious condition, and ironically, they got a helicopter in and flew him to University Hospital. So.
Wow. Well, I know the FAA is in today doing an investigation. Is that right?
Yeah, NTSB are the ones who lead that when they come in and all. And gosh, you wonder about a pilot that young and how many hours he had in the aircraft and all that thing. But, can't second guess it, I guess, until we hear back from the investigators.
Yeah, I know a lot of folks locally here fly those small planes, and so I always hold my breath when I see a story like that. Just a tragedy. Well, we've got some breaking news this morning, Mark, about JP Morgan Chase and banking. But yesterday we had a lot of breaking news about crypto, and I think people, you hear crypto, and I think you still think like, oh, the weird guys and they're doing illegal things with crypto, and everyone wants to regulate crypto. But the news from JP Morgan Chase out this morning, I'm thinking, should we be keeping a closer eye on these bankers?
Well, so this week's traditionally the week when banks issue their profit loss, and about literally less than a half hour ago, JP Morgan issued theirs. They made $14 billion in profit. But I thought was most interesting was $2.7 billion in profit off of Silicon Valley Bank. If you remember, that bank failed. The federal government, instead of auctioning it off like it is traditionally done, brokered a deal with JP Morgan Chase and gave them the bank at a discounted rate. And they made $2.7 billion at a quarter off of that bank. I mean, that's unbelievable. 20% of the largest bank in the world's profit, 20% came from a failed bank that the federal government gave them.
That is ridiculous. And the banking thing really bothers me for a number of reasons. A lot of times from the feds you hear, and from the left you hear, oh, there's a monopoly and these things are getting too big. And, you hear that with tech and social media, for example. And then yet they allowed for basically consolidation of the banking industry and just giving some of these failed banks over to the bigger banks. So we have fewer banks now, but bigger banks. And that seems like the opposite of what they're typically telling us is good for public policy.
Absolutely. It's the hypocrisy of it. You're now hearing everybody, the federal government, talk about let's consolidate banks down. They want community banks, but then they're going to impose controls on community banks that make them fail. At the same time, those community banks then get merged into these bigger banks, and we get larger and larger banks. We're going to end up with, 20 banks in the United States, and you're going to go to one of them.
Well, and then have we ever heard what actually did everyone who supposedly lost their money, all the individuals, did they all get their money back, or are there still because that's what I worry about is the individuals. We're giving all this money and all this profit to JP Morgan Chase, but at least on Twitter everyone was saying I can't get a hold of my money.
I think everybody who had non-massive amounts of money in Silicon Bank were able to get that money pretty quickly once the FDIC stepped in. They back you up to $250,000. So if you have less than that in your bank account, you're almost 100% safe regardless of what happens to your bank. It was some of the folks that had really large sums of money in that bank. That was a venture capital bank. There were people that had billions of dollars in that bank.
And we don't think those people have fully recovered.
I think they may have gotten notes of some type or another, but that's not been really clear how they managed to make sure that everybody was made whole. The one thing that's interesting is the FDIC has not come out, as they've done with other bank failures, and made a big deal about everybody was made whole, which they used to always say.
Interesting. Well, and so we get this banking news today on the top of yesterday's big crypto news, and we had kind of 2 stories out in a really quick amount of time. I need Kamala to step in for me like she did on AI and really give me the breakdown for crypto, because every time I think I know crypto, I don't. And so one big company that was under federal investigation and in this litigation, Ripple, big news yesterday for them.
Yeah, big news for Ripple. SEC brought an action against Ripple regarding the sale of securities. It's the argument that's being out there that crypto is securities. And it was actually a pretty big blow to the SEC, the way they lost part of that case. They won part of the case. Ripple sold some of their tokens directly to investors. That's actually a sale of securities, is what the court held. But the big one was Ripple was putting things out on things like Coinbase, on these exchanges, where they were not directly selling their tokens to investors. And the court said that's not the sale of security. And if that's the case, and that I assume the SEC will appeal that, but if that's the case, then that argument that crypto is illegal securities just disappears right off the table if you're buying it through these third-party exchanges that are out there, like Coinbase, which is kind of the most well-known one.
How strong is the push on Capitol Hill right now, Mark, to regulate those kind of securities?
You know, they keep talking about it. They've not made a really strong, concerted push. There's a lot of division over whether crypto ought to be regulated or not. People love crypto. There are a lot of people that are very heavily invested in it. And there are a lot of crypto companies that have spent a lot of money up on Capitol Hill. I mean, you remember FTX when it crashed. One of the big stories about that was the hundreds of millions of dollars they had contributed to Republicans and Democrats to make sure that they weren't regulated. I do think that, you know, the thing that's still out there is a lot of these crypto companies have failed and they continue to fail. And that's probably more likely where you see regulation is because they keep failing. And whenever there's an industry where there's a lot of failures, government eventually steps in.
Well, and unlike the bank failures, there's no FDIC as an individual to get your money back. You're just down to, what is it, Doge? Is Dogecoin still around?
I don't even know if that still exists or not. But you know, the Celsius CEO, and they were a crypto lender, where you could put money into their accounts and they would give you a high rate of return, and then they failed and everybody lost everything in that. Again, that was about $14 billion in crypto that people just lost everything. They just arrested and indicted the former CEO. I guess he's still the CEO of Celsius. And you know, that guy's probably going to go to prison for what happened.
And so what's the difference here between what happened with Ripple and this guy? I mean, it seems like, my understanding with the Ripple stuff is it might have implications beyond just Ripple, because the FTC is also after places like Coinbase and some of these platforms, which essentially, because they said if you're trading on a platform and it's not known who it is, you're off the hook. So it might make some of these other current cases and investigations go away, yet at the same time they're going after this guy. So
yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different only from the perspective of the SEC, you know, can only regulate securities. And if the court's rulings held up and these token on exchanges are not securities, then the SEC's out of that business. They just can't regulate it. They don't have any authority there. You know, when you look at like what happened with Celsius, they were doing a whole different end of the equation. They were taking people's tokens, taking people's cryptos, putting it into what they called a bank, promising them returns, and then when they turned out that they were rigging the books and they failed, everybody lost everything. That's where you're going to get regulation. But there's crime. I mean, it's a crime. There's ultimately people who go to jail for that. And same thing with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. I mean, he's going to end up probably going to jail for a long time.
And not only do folks who are invested in crypto have to worry about the feds, but they might also have to worry about the state. We've had some folks on talking about crypto in the state, and I think our friend, his name escapes me. He's also in marijuana. He's the state's first crypto lobbyist. You know him. I will.
You lost me on that one. Yeah,
Ethan Thampy.
Ethan Thampy. That's
Ethan,
right.
yeah,
and Ethan is like the state's first registered crypto lobbyist. And I don't exactly know what bills he was, but like what's the state's interest in regulating crypto, and who would do it? And has there been any talk or push of it other than somebody hired Ethan, I think, to push back against crypto reg?
There are several states that have regulated crypto. Crypto, particularly if it's a security. Missouri has the authority to regulate securities. It's actually inside the Secretary of State's office. There's a commissioner of securities, and Missouri has limited authority. It's not as expansive as the federal government's authority, but to regulate securities. And if crypto is securities, they would have that. If it's banking, if it's deemed to be actually a banking resource, states have authorities to regulate banks and financial institutions. concurrent with the federal government. So there are states that have done some regulatory work on crypto. I think Wyoming got into a big dispute over special banking privileges for crypto banks, and there was a little bit of a controversy about that. Ironically, I think the one bill, John, that was mentioned recently about crypto on Capitol Hill, the senator from Wyoming I think her name is Cynthia Lummis, and she and Kirsten Gillibrand from New York are sponsoring a bill that deals with crypto. I thought that was interesting. The two of them were talking about it. I think Wyoming's been a real interesting little niche of crypto stuff.
Yeah, I remember seeing that story on it, and I think it was like they had a very friendly business environment in Cheyenne for those crypto businesses, giving them all sorts of breaks.
Yeah, I think they changed some laws and waived some stuff to allow them to have effectively to be banks, but do actual banking simply via crypto.
We're talking about how to attract people to your state. Is Wyoming like the crypto safe haven?
It may be. I don't know. It depends on how safe you think crypto really is.
That's a good point. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and take a quick break here, but we've got some interesting things coming up in the 2024 race, Mark.
of all the money they make.
Okay.
In this case, he's not hiring a fundraiser. He's asking you to be his fundraiser, and you get to keep 10% of it. So you're just effectively his fundraiser.
How does he keep track of all of that?
I think they're doing it all online through a portal, and it'll just automatically report up.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah,
it's legal under the federal election law. Nobody's ever done it before. It's actually, I give the guy credit. It's a very clever way of raising money because, those same donors are going to get a call from XYZ fundraising company, and that company's going to keep the money. Now that donor can give the money themselves and get other people to give money, and they get to make the money. I mean, it's kind of a win-win if you think about it.
A couple people on the Twitter thread where he posted this video are calling it a pyramid scheme.
Exactly. That was what I was thinking.
Somebody actually posted a picture of a pink Cadillac and photoshopped Ramaswamy above it.
Exactly.
That's really good. So it's not technically a new idea, apparently, but in the world of politics, I haven't seen it before. Have you, Mark?
It is the first time as far as I know, it's the first time anybody's ever done it. And in fact, when it first came out, people ran to the books to look to see if it's illegal or not. Yes, it is.
Apparently, you really need to go read the Twitter because Hannah is cracking herself up.
The pink Cadillac with pink eyeshadow above it, and then Ramaswamy written.
I love it. Well, and we were talking about Doug Burgum, and if you're not familiar with Doug Burgum, you would not be the only one. He is the governor of North Dakota, but we talked to our good friend Doug Coda, our coworker who is from North Dakota, about this idea, and he is actually just mailing people a gift card. And I said I thought that was really smart, and he's essentially he's independently wealthy, just like Ramaswamy, and he's essentially buying his way onto the debate stage because August 23rd, I think, Mark, is the first debate. I think Trump's already said he's not going to be there.
Right.
But you have to have 40,000. I think you have to have a certain percentage of popularity, or you have to have polling numbers, or you have to have 40,000 individual donors. So
actually, you have to have both.
Oh, you have to have both?
You have to have both.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Man.
Okay.
So
instant fact check.
It's what's interesting about it is you have to have both, and what they've said is the Republican National Committee said is each debate goes forward, they will ratchet up those numbers.
What are the polling
numbers? So that you'll
numbers?
have to be.
Do you know?
You have to be, I think, over 1%. Don't hold me to that.
Over 1.
Maybe over 2%. Right now, there's only, I think, 6 candidates that could qualify for the debate stage.
I was thinking it was going to be more significant. I'm like, DeSantis can't debate himself, so it's really low, is what you're saying.
So I think right now the debate stage, assuming everybody went, would be Trump, DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Chris Christie, and Mike Pence.
Okay.
Are the ones that everybody thinks has qualified. Now, there's some question about Pence, whether he'll get the donor number or not. They all have the polling sufficient number, and they're, I think they're polling at 4%, which is pretty low number to get on. The Burgum thing's interesting because if you donate $1,
yeah, you get $20. You
get $20 gift card. He's doing 50,000 of those, so it's $1 million of his own cash he's putting in.
Yeah.
And
he was a big software guy, wasn't he?
Yep.
Wasn't that where his money came from?
Yeah, he's I don't know if he's a billionaire or just a wildly top of the end multimillionaire, but he's got his own money.
But yeah, I mean, why not buy your way onto the debate stage? The only way I think to increase your polling numbers at that point is to get that national recognition and to go toe to toe with some of these other folks. But I guess my point with Ramaswamy is, so I see why Burgum is doing that because he needs to get on the debate stage. With Ramaswamy, I guess maybe this could help him get more individual donors. And I'm thinking, if I get a call from like a robot call and they say, "Will you donate $1 to?" I'd be like, "No." But if Mark comes to me and he's like, "He's my guy, will you donate money to him?" Then maybe if friends asking friends, maybe it will increase his donors. But it doesn't seem to be so strategic like the Burgum plan is.
No, look, Ramaswamy's been funding his own campaign almost on his own, and I think he's probably wanting to get some other people to cash some money in, so he's not just spending his own cash. It does not look good in the long run on a presidential race if the only people that can give you money are yourself. It doesn't show a real depth of support.
But I think he's really popular. Now, you really like DeSantis. Feel free to tell us about that. And I think the other one, Brandon really likes Tim Scott. So, I really like Ramaswamy. I understand he probably is not going to win, but it looks like you got a 30-second pitch for DeSantis?
Yeah, look.
Generous.
I'll give you the best 30-second pitch in the world. Look at Florida. It's where everybody wants to go, and it's not where everybody wanted to go before Ron DeSantis was governor. And I would say one final thing.
Friday, and what bill was a turd sandwich? Not this bill that we're about to talk about for sure.
Was it the budget
bill? Perhaps.
I think it might have been the budget bill, actually.
All right. Well, we're getting ready to talk about a really good bill here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri. And election integrity has been top of mind, not only on the federal level, but here in the state. Now, we've spoken both to State Senator Bill Eigel and State Senator Mike Bernskoetter today, and both were asked about election integrity and what they're hearing from voters as they talk to their own constituents, how concerned folks are. We've seen some polling even late this week that people are still very concerned about whether their vote counts. And I'll have to tell you, I was a little bit... And so for the last couple of years, we know the liberals have been trying to federalize our elections. We've talked to our own Secretary of State about how they should stay out of our elections and let him do his job, let our local folks like Steve Korsmeyer and Breonna Lennon do their jobs. And when I first heard that my own organization, the organization Mark heads right now, was proposing federal legislation on elections, I was a little bit concerned. And after reading...
That's a mild understatement.
I was not a happy camper. I thought, aren't we the folks that are saying leave it to the states? And so that's why we have brought in Hans von Spakovsky, who's going to join us. He actually was in Atlanta when they announced and had this committee hearing, announced this new ACE Act. He is former DOJ, former Federal Election Commission member, and we are happy to welcome you in, Hans.
Well, thanks for having me. And look, I have exactly the same concerns that you do. You know, I don't want the feds nationalizing the election process. As you know, they tried to do that 4 years ago when they passed H.R. 1, which would have completely taken over elections from the states and had all kinds of really bad provisions in it, like a federal ban on all voter ID laws, which, of course, you know, it would just be horrible. But this bill, it's called the American Confidence Elections Act. This bill very carefully, it was drafted up by the Republicans. It very carefully respects the federal-state balance. And, in fact, what it does is it directs the federal government to help the state. And I'll give you a very specific example. As you know, you're supposed to be a U.S. citizen if you're going to vote in a federal or state election. That's a requirement under the law. For years, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the bureaucrats there have made it next to impossible for state election officials to get any information from them on the citizenship status of people who are registered to vote. This bill, if it passes into law, tells all federal agencies that they have to provide any information they have that's relevant to whether somebody's eligible to vote to state election officials when those election officials request it. That's a good change.
Yeah, Hans, I mean, look, that's really important. I think, you know, voter identification is really important, and those kind of go hand in hand. The ACE Act has some provisions about voter identification and you know, conversely, encouraging, I think even in Washington, D.C., where the federal government has control, getting some voter identification, getting election integrity. How does this act really move that side of it forward?
Actually, it's interesting you mentioned D.C., because remember, the one place in the country where Congress has complete authority is over the District of Columbia. So there is a big provision in here that basically tells the District of Columbia they actually have to start cleaning up their voter rolls. They have to require an ID, and among other things, says you cannot allow aliens to vote in elections. You all probably saw the news, right? That the City Council of Washington, D.C., a couple of months ago passed an ordinance that now allows aliens to vote in local elections in the District of Columbia. And the only thing you have to do is have lived in the district for 30 days. So not only does that mean that if you're an illegal alien, you'll be able to vote local elections, but if you're a Russian spy stationed in the Russian embassy, as long as you live in D.C. for 30 days, you'll be able to vote in local elections.
Now, what's the likelihood of this actually going anywhere? I think, you know, it's doubtful. Obviously, it sets some high goals, but, you know, how do we keep pushing forward election integrity and convincing our friends and neighbors that their vote counts, you know, given the current makeup in Congress?
Well, this will run into heavy winds in the U.S. Senate because Democrats don't want, for example, I could give you lots of examples of this, but Democrats don't want these provisions that will make elections cleaner. They don't want the Department of Homeland Security, for example, providing information on citizenship status to state election officials because they want aliens to be able to register and vote in elections. I mean, all you got to do is look at the Democratic city council in D.C. that passed this. New York did the same thing. Their Democratic city council, they want aliens voting because they believe it'll help them get elected and retain power. So unfortunately, yeah, this probably won't get through the Senate, but it's a good marker for the kind of things that the federal government can do in this area. The real work is going to continue to be where we all think it should be, and that's in the states. And that means convincing state legislatures to put in the kind of provisions that are required, like voter ID laws. And if they won't do it, then doing it through the referendum process.
Is there any provision in the current ACE Act that you think might enjoy some bipartisan support?
You would hope so. I mean, you just have to wonder. You have to wonder why it is Democrats are so against election integrity, but no, I think that they just are adamant about this. I mean, look, to give you another example, this thing doesn't just deal with election administration. It also has a provision to terminate that disinformation board that the Department of Homeland Security set up to supposedly control misinformation. In other words, tell us what it is we ought to know and make sure we don't hear things they don't think we should hear.
Yeah, it was the crazy lady singing that Mary Poppins song, right? No more of her, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. So there's a whole provision basically telling the federal government they can't engage in censorship. Now, you would think even liberals would agree with that, and yet I just don't think they're going to support this bill, even though it's got good provisions like that in it.
Well, we all know that liberals enjoy censorship, particularly when they have the controls of the lever to censor folks. Speaking of one of those levers, I mean, look at social media and Mark Zuckerberg. Here in Missouri, we had all sorts of money that went into some jurisdictions, the Zuck Bucks. Missouri's tried to pass some laws to tamp that down. That's a national problem. The ACE Act gets into that. How do we stop these private funding of elections? I think that's just a terrible idea.
A number of states have passed bans on this. I think close to 12.5 states, the state legislatures have passed bans on it. There's actually in Louisiana a referendum going to be on the ballot this fall to amend their constitution to get rid of private funding. And the ACE Act has a provision that's going to ban that in federal elections.
Tell me about what it was like to be in Atlanta for the big announcement of this legislation and at the hearing. Of course, it was on the eve of the MLB All-Star Game, and that really heated up, and they moved it last year. But, of course, if we're watching the facts, and Branden likes to mention that it's always we're looking at just the facts. The voter rolls in Georgia, the turnout was actually amongst the highest numbers they've ever seen. And so while they said this new state legislation would disenfranchise people, the facts show that it actually didn't. So what was it like to be in Georgia? And what are the state officials there saying about their own state legislation?
They were all extremely positive about it. And so was the audience. There was actually a bigger audience for this. What was going on was a field hearing, which, as you know, is unusual for congressional committees. So they had a field hearing in Atlanta. There was a much bigger audience than you would normally see at a hearing in Washington, D.C. And folks there not only were enthusiastic about this bill, but when certain members of the committee, Democratic members of the committee, started saying that, the reforms Georgia had passed kept people from voting, there were members of the audience yelling out and heckling them and say that is a lie, which in fact is absolutely true. In fact, I'll give you just one fun fact out of this. Remember, Joe Biden, right, went to Atlanta, gave this fiery speech claiming that the reforms that Georgia had passed were Jim Crow 2.0. Well, listen, in the last election, Georgia had higher turnout of its voters than Joe Biden's home state of Delaware, than Chuck Schumer, who also criticized Georgia. Georgia had higher turnout than his home state of New York, and Georgia had higher turnout than California, where Nancy Pelosi is, who also criticized Georgia's election reform bills. All that came out at that hearing. So it was actually an interesting hearing.
I think we can watch it on YouTube. Well, Hans, thanks for joining us this morning. Really interesting stuff on election law, and I hope that we can eventually get something done. I can't, and thanks for all your work with Heritage. We point to your website frequently when people talk about election fraud. You've got real examples on there, actually some that happened in Missouri. So if you're interested, check out the Heritage Foundation website. And also, I have to put in a plug for all the good work that RNLA does, too. I feel like election integrity really starts on the ground. And, you know, we're lucky that we have a lot of volunteers here in mid-Missouri. But if you've ever thought about being a poll watcher, an election worker, those folks are always needed. And I think that's the first line of defense against election fraud and for election integrity. So encourage everyone to get involved in this next cycle and volunteer if you can. But thanks, Hans. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Coming up next, the Morning Bell, and we're having fun on this Feel Good Friday, so we're switching it up a little bit. Mark is going to cover. We've done a lot of business news this morning, but Mark, what's up for the Morning Bell?
Well, you know, everybody wants to have their own media company. Donald Trump created his. Another fan favorite is announcing that they're going to start their own media company.
All right. That's next on Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
I'm going to be nominating Corey and I think Travis for winner of the week. So send in your noms, 874-9390. And now it's time for the Morning Bell with Mark Ellinger.
Yeah, substituting in here. How about that?
All right.
So, everybody has started their own media company. Donald Trump started a media company. Truth Social kind of has struggled a little bit. Obviously, some people have been more successful. Guess who? Tucker Carlson, the guy who ceremoniously was dumped from Fox News, went out, started his YouTube channel, which was a big hit right off the bat, and his numbers have plummeted now. Has joined with a former White House advisor to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to start their own media company.
Doesn't Tucker Carlson have hundreds of millions? Isn't he still getting paid out from that Fox contract?
Yeah, but there's a difference between $20 million a year and raising hundreds of millions of dollars in cash. They're going to use Twitter as the backbone and do videos that he'll be doing the speaking on the videos, plus other affiliated content. I think this is kind of this new trend that we have where if you get kicked out for whatever reason of whatever entity you're in, you just go and start your own media company.
I was just thinking that, like, is there some checklist that's, passed around for when things like that? Yes, a bingo card.
Apparently, the first thing that they have to do is you have to lose your job so that you could get the first step of the bingo card to move forward.
But none of these things have really caught on.
Yeah, hey, Tucker, I've got one word for you: CNN Plus.
And John, you bring up a good point because a lot of these other, like, what was it, MTV News? I mean, a bunch of these news or Vice, a lot of these have been shutting down. And so what makes you think, and then of all platforms, you pick Twitter, and after the DeSantis announcement fiasco, that's the platform you're going to bankroll or use to try to bankroll your new media company?
Well, I can't see Tucker Carlson using Threads because I'm pretty sure he's not going to go with Meta. So that's probably not an option for him. But in the end, I mean, this is an example of a big name with the concept that they'll drive a lot of traffic. And historically, that just doesn't work.
And potentially, though, he could make a lot of money on Twitter. I was seeing friends here in mid-Missouri, other conservative commentators yesterday saying apparently everyone got a big paycheck from Elon yesterday on Twitter if you were a creator. And I'm like, where's my money? I don't make the cut.
Well, we kind of looked at one of those, and I think the guy who got a $10,000 check had 433 million impressions in 1 month.
I think they're saying you have to have at least 500,000 impressions and so many followers to get paid. And what they're saying, so people were posting up big numbers yesterday, and what they're saying is Twitter paid out $5 million, but it's cumulative since, I think, February. So it's not like this is a monthly check, but still, as Twitter is currently in a fight with Meta and with Threads, certainly an incentive to be on Twitter as opposed, if you're going to get paid, to just be on there.
If you're going to get paid, why not take it? I'm sure Microsoft will jump in with their products.
And now for nominees for the winners and losers of the week.
All right, Stephanie Bell in for Branden Rathert. You know what time it is. It's winners and losers. We do it every Friday on a Feel Good Friday. You can text us at 573-874-9390 and nominate your very own winners and losers. Of course, we always love when you nominate someone local. Of course, it's easy to pick on those in the White House, especially this week. We're also all wearing, even Mark got the memo, we are all wearing our red this Friday. Hannah, why do we wear red on Fridays?
We wear red on Fridays to remember everyone deployed, and kudos to Mark for wearing red because we always forget to tell our guests on Friday.
I did send him a reminder.
Oh, nice.
So kudos to me. I'm a winner for remembering to remind the guests. But we will, we are going to have some guest hosts over the next week. So a quick aside before we get to winners and losers. Mark will be back with us on Monday. John will be hosting a bit. We've got Steve Spellman in again next week, and Jennifer Bukowski will be joining me on Friday. So we're going to have a fun week coming up. And also Monday, we will be hearing from Secretary of State and gubernatorial candidate Jay Ashcroft. We had a spicy interview with Senator Bill Eigel this morning. He had some things to say about the Secretary of State. So we'll have to ask him about that and see if he has a response on Monday. Of course, we heard from the other gubernatorial candidate, Lieutenant Governor Kehoe, yesterday. Did I say gubernatorial candidate? Our lieutenant governor, yes. Right. But anyway, I know a lot of you had some hot takes on that interview this morning, and I suspect as we move toward 2024, that race will be heating up. So we hope you will join us again Monday morning. We are playing winners and losers. And Brian, who's your winner and loser for the week?
We all know Brian's not going to have a loser.
No loser. And by the way, definitely after that, that was one of the most interesting interviews we've had on this show in a long time with Eigel. I mean, he really, really let the governor have it publicly, and the former governor, quite frankly, for that matter. So very, very interesting. I do have two winners this week, Stephanie. I'm going to nominate, and this is a name that our listeners in Fulton will remember, Helen Janet Forsey. She was 88 years old, lived in a nursing home for most of her late life, towards the end of her life in the nursing home. She donated at least, we don't know exactly how much because they're not saying, at least $1 million to the Callaway County Public Library, the largest single gift in the history of the library. Worked at International Shoe and somehow accumulated that and basically wanted that library to be for the future. So they're very grateful to her. So we nominate her, Mrs. Forsey, who died in a nursing home. And Tyronn Lue. Tyronn Lue grew up in Mexico, Missouri, of course, coaches the LA Clippers. He and former coach and now the owner, Steve Ballmer of the LA Clippers, have donated $10 million to the city of Mexico, Missouri. And that's going to be for the youth. That is tremendous. And he also quietly, I confirm this, he quietly paid for 350 kids to swim at the Mexico swimming pool on the 4th of July and paid for all their food and drink. Didn't ask for any publicity, but I have learned that from multiple sources that he did that. So kudos to Tyronn Lue as well.
All right, and we have to go to Bill's text. He has a winner of the week, and I think Branden joins in on that nomination. He says, Hannah, in my opinion, is winner of the week with her comment that, and I'm not going to say it, we'll let you play the audio.
All right, here it is. I don't know what the big deal is about the cocaine stuff. I mean, Biden's not the first president to have issues with blow in the White House. That was like Monday morning at 6:10. Like, I was ready to go.
It was all downhill from there, right?
Really,
yes, it was.
All right. And John, let's go to you. Who are your winners and losers of the week?
Got a couple of winners, and Mark can relate to this one. Cole County EMS, Emergency Medical Services, who got to answer to Mark when he was presiding commissioner in the county of Cole. Honored by the American Heart Association with their Lifeline EMS Silver Award for their heart and stroke response, and they've also lowered their response times by about 5%. And kind of a winner, but a sad one, Donnie Schneiders died this week at his home. He was the KWS master gardener on the radio for years, very instrumental in setting up the Vitae Foundation, the pro-life group. Donnie Schneiders was 89.
All right, we can't be too optimistic here. We got to throw out some losers. I think. Oh, Mark, you got a loser?
Oh, we got a bunch of losers.
Okay.
It's a big week for losers in Missouri. I'll start off with Crystal Quaid. Great lady. I think she's a very nice person, but she's just announced that she's going to run for governor and lose. So there's the first loser of the week.
Did she say that in her announcement?
I don't think she added the lose comment, but I'm pretty sure she added the rest of that.
One question that's been burning in my mind is, remember when we went through the U.S. Senate race and everyone had to outdo each other in their ads with like what we did, like the gun. Guyton started with the guns.
There was a flamethrower.
Yeah.
There was like, a torch. So she started out like the challenge because she was doing roller derby. So I really kind of wanted to ask Eigel this morning, okay, she's doing roller derby. What sport are you going to come in with next? Because I think we should
skateboarding.
I think we should issue
I predict we will see Mike Keogh on a horse sometime during the campaign.
Or a tractor.
Or with a ladder duct taped to the front of the tractor. We've seen this before.
He set up a ladder in the scoop of his tractor
to get to something.
Probably not OSHA approved, that one.
Definitely not. He did send us a photo, so this is a real story. Okay, what other losers
All right,
do you have,
so
Mark?
sticking with the theme here, but it's two losers and a winner that kind of come together. Carla May, Wesley Bell. Carla May announced she's running for U.S. Senate. She's from St. Louis. Wesley Bell is the St. Louis City County prosecutor. He's running for Senate. They've just gutted any opportunity they had of beating who the Democrat nominee will be, which is Lucas Kuntz, who's the big winner this week, I think, politically in Missouri, because maybe one or the other of them could have given him a run, but the two of them will split the vote and split the endorsements in the black community, and Lucas Kuntz will walk in as the nominee to go against Josh Hawley. So I think once again, Missouri State Democrats are losers because they can't get out of their own way.
And I think you bring up a very good point about May and Bell dividing the vote, and Lucas Kuntz also has name recognition as well. But Mark, you're doing a good job this morning. I'm glad you're in here. I remember
Brian, you're apparently the only one that thinks so. No, because Mark just got two simultaneous nominations on the texter for not being able to pronounce Missouri.
You're just wrong. Sorry, it's Missouri. Let's just stick with that.
Kit Bond would agree with you, and so would former Governor John Ashcroft.
on the Missouri topic, another guy who says that a lot, Scott Fawn.
Yeah.
He actually tweeted at Stephanie and I just a couple minutes ago, and he said Millie, who is his daughter, Millie was excited, but in the end, Stephanie Bell came up just seconds short of being on time for What's Hot with Hannah.
Loser of the week. Darn, I try to be on time. We've also got a nomination from Cecilia. She said she would like to nominate Don and Ruth Ann Schneiders along with Carl Landwehr for their efforts to get Vitae Caring Foundation up and running in central Missouri.
That's huge.
So a huge organization, big impact in mid-Missouri. So thank you for that. Also, what else do we have off the text? Oh, there is a nomination for Amelia Bell, I think, that we have
There
some audio
is.
for.
Oh, very good.
And it was for this moment specifically, I think.
When we ask your mom, like, who's your favorite kid? Is it Drew, Amelia, or who's the one Eden? Who do you think she says is her favorite kid?
You're looking right at her.
I love that. Just real quick, you're looking right at her.
They have an ongoing debate, and when Drew heard that, he said, well, what was your answer, Mom? And I said, the question wasn't directed to me, Drew. I did not answer. So
sounds like a lawyer right there.
She said, you're my favorite son.
I constantly tell them my favorite is whoever sleeps the latest.
I was going to say, you said before on the show, it's kind of like a day by day.
It
who
really
the favorite is.
And of course, my son, who is obsessed with trivia, came in and said, do you know that actually 90% of all parents say that they actually do have a favorite child? And I thought, of course you would know. Some random factoid. Okay, my other nomination for Loser of the Week on the federal side is Kamala. And if you didn't know, her name starts with the letter K. But she had some interesting comments this week, and she just talks herself in circles. And I know we can all misspeak, but it's just time and time and time again. It's like my kids, when they first learn to talk and they're just Captain Obvious, they just say the obvious, whether it's how big a country is or how many letters are in something. Hannah, I think you have this audio.
I do.
And I think the first part of this issue that should be articulated is AI is kind of a fancy thing. It's, first of all, it's two letters. It means artificial intelligence.
No, I am glad that she clarified, because if you're like me, and listener John texted us this morning too, AI stands for something very different when you're in the agriculture industry.
Oh,
so
Hannah, your big long glove.
Yeah, I did appreciate the the explainer from the vice president there.
who was she actually? Was she talking to a room full of kindergartners?
No, I think it was
Just
actually
a bunch of politicians.
I think
so
it was
about
actually
the same.
an AI discussion that they were getting involved in.
That's just
Step
hard to
one.
believe.
I mean, I could do my Kamala impersonation, which is, we have to have an explanation because it's very important that y'all understand how we explain these explanations about things.
Oh my gosh, it's just brutal.
Word
And
salad right there.
so I think we have another winner of the week, and that's whoever is the cokehead in the White House, right?
Scot free.
I mean, the case closed. That's what they said this morning. And also, I don't know if it's a winner or a loser, but whoever had the marijuana the last 2 years, I think probably loser because up until this point, you probably thought you got away with it. And no one was ever going to know that your weed got found in the White House. And now at least people know. And so if you were planning on or currently have drugs in the White House, maybe you're a loser because you're thinking, maybe I should be a little bit more careful.
Well,
No, we think back to the Carter administration and Willie Nelson admitting that he climbed to the roof of the White House when he visited and smoked a big fat one, I think was his line.
So maybe the loser up on this one is the Secret Service, who can't figure out how to stop. They can't stop illegal drugs from coming into the White House.
Fair point. Fair point.
I would add one thing too. Something Mark said about Missouri versus Missouri. At the state fair in Sedalia, you go down the road 60. Mark knows it's 60 miles from Jeff City. Almost everyone at that state fair says Missouri. And the other thing is, if you go down to southeast part of the state, everyone calls it Missouri. I mean, everyone. You go to Farmington, Poplar Bluff, Missouri.
Anywhere there's politicians.
Well, it's just these are not just the older people; these are younger people too. Northwest Missouri, I worked in. They tended to say Missouri, but you go to the state fair, like I said, there's a lot of people that say. In Northeast, those folks, a lot of them say Missouri as well.
When we
so
travel,
it's just very interesting of the different regions of the state.
Yeah, when we travel and meet people from out of state, we're very confusing because I'm a Missouri person and Mark's, and they're like, "What is the proper way?" And we argue internally about it.
Missouri's Kit Bond is what that used to be his campaign commercial. Missouri's Kit Bond.
And for years, St. Louis politicians would show up in outside
excellent reality TV. And I love some reality TV. I shouldn't, but I have to think really hard during the day, and sometimes you just want to check out. And so I was hoping for the advent of some new cool reality TV, and so far we've got a big fat nothing.
What I love is the phenomenon of women getting sucked into reality TV shows and dudes trying to say, "Oh no, I would never watch that."
And then you've got like Ice Road Truckers.
Well, no, they end up watching these trashy TV shows with their wives, and then they get more into it than the wife does.
That's for sure.
Lot of truth to that. But there was an article out last night that a number of studios are talking about ramping up new reality TV concepts. So you may get your wish yet, Stephanie.
I can't wait.
More MILF Island.
Or you could just watch Wake Up Mid-Missouri every morning on YouTube. All right, Monday morning, we've got a big show. Mark will be back with us. We've also got the Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft. Again, we had a spicy interview with Bill Eigel this morning. He had a lot to say